Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to ARC's weekly fireside chat. Today, we're going to be talking with some of our members about literally what's going on in our communities, not just here in California and in Los Angeles, but across the nation. But before we get into that, I'd like to just give some basic instructions. If you look at the bottom of your screen, there's a chat box where you can chat, you can send questions and ask us questions that can actually be delivered to those of us that are on the panel. Just want to say, in terms of being an organization that does quite a bit of work inside the prison system and in criminal justice reform, where many of our sisters and brothers and family members are incarcerated, just think for a minute that George Floyd had two choices when that knee was on his neck: die or go to prison. I'd like to introduce some of our amazing panelist members and members of the Anti-Recidivism Coalition. First, I'd like for Dominique Davis to please introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Dominique Davis. I have been a member of ARC for the last 2.5 years. I'm a community health worker with the Good Seed Ascent. I work as a community health worker to help people who are coming home from incarceration and back into society through supportive services.
Thank you, Dominique. Appreciate having you here with us. Antwon, would you please introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Antwon Carter, and I'm a formerly incarcerated individual myself. I've been in and out of incarcerations from a juvenile, all the juvenile facilities in Los Angeles. I've pretty much touched all the way up into adulthood prison. Served 3.5 years on a 6-year prison sentence, which was my last prison bid. And I'm glad to be here to represent for justice. Thank you.
Thank you, brother. Great having you here with us. Mark, would you please introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Mark. I was sentenced to 26 years to life in the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation as a young man. I ended up spending 21.5 years in prison. I was released on September 12th, 2018, been out of prison around 21 months. Now I'm a life coach for the Anti-Recidivism Coalition's Hope and Redemption team, and I facilitate character development classes in Pelican Bay State Prison, which is California's only super maximum security prison and widely considered to be one of the most notorious prisons in the country. And what I do is give these men the tools they need to get home to their families. Thank you.
Thank you, brother. Great to have you here with us today. Myles, please introduce yourself, brother.
Sir, hello everyone. My name is Myles Flournoy. I was incarcerated in Pelican Bay State Prison for about 34 months. I was released December 4th to a men's reentry facility, otherwise known as MCRP. I was housed there until I was officially released May 20th, and I'm currently under parole supervision. And I'm really glad to be among you guys today. And thank you all for allowing me to share space with you.
Hey, thank you, brother. Appreciate you being here, Myles. And as you all know, my name is Sam Lewis. I'm the executive director of ARC, the Anti-Recidivism Coalition, and I spent 24 years inside California state prisons. Where we are today, much of the discussion in the nation right now is about police killing Black people and how our communities are in danger, constant danger. This group is uniquely positioned to comment on policing. We know what policing is, but one point on the continuum in ways in which Black life is devalued is by the system, which purposely does not keep us safe or care for us. We brought these unique individuals into this space so that we could talk about some of the things that directly affect us. Dominique, to begin with, first, how are you? What brought you into this space, and how are you thinking about the moment that we're in?
Thanks, Sam. I'm energized is how I'm feeling. I'm feeling real energized. I feel like we're waking people up out here, and I'm specifically here because I'm tired of the police brutality in my neighborhoods. I'm tired of the over-policing. I'm tired of the harassment. I'm tired of the oppression of my community. The work that I do in this space is actually, I help people who are formerly incarcerated when they come home from prisons and county jails. There's an overwhelming amount of people who are released without resources. There's an overwhelming amount of people who should have never been put in jail in the first place because of our unjust, crooked judicial system. There are plenty of people who have mental illnesses who are being basically sent to the slaughter, to the county jails, and given incarceration and inflating their numbers when they need mental help, when they need community support. So I'm just tired of seeing this injustice time and time again, and that's why I'm here.
Thank you, Dominique. Appreciate you, little sister. Antwon, and like, what are you thinking about in this moment that we're in right now, as you see everything that's not just happening in California and Los Angeles or Minneapolis, but across the nation, not just across the nation, but in the world? Like in this moment, what are you thinking?
That's a good question. Right now, what I'm thinking in this moment is a lot of things. Certainly, I think it's unfortunate that lives have to be taken and murdered. The lynching continues, as we see in Ahmaud Arbery's case, as we see in the brother George Floyd, as we stand for justice in that right now. I see a lot of hurt. I see a lot of pain, but I also see a lot of hope. I see a lot of hope. I see a lot of promise. I see unity. I see solidarity in places that I didn't think it would come from. I see a lot of hope, and I'm hopeful that that hope, and as we continue to move forward in that hope and put plan into action, that we can make some changes within our communities locally, on the state level, and then on a federal level, so we can collectively change the narrative in this nation when it comes to Black and brown people and all people, minority, with this issue of equality that we have right now, because that's the issue we have, equality in America.
Thank you, Antwon. Appreciate you, brother. Myles, in this moment, because you've been home relatively recently, and in this moment, right now, as you see everything that's going on, what are you thinking? What are your thoughts?
Well, firstly, it was a crazy time to come out, you know. Secondly, it's a bittersweet moment. You know, it's always unfortunate when something like that happens with police officers and the brutality that happens. What makes the moment a little bit better for me is just knowing that things are getting better, right? I mean, collectively, people are coming together and trying to make some changes. And just seeing people come together like that gives me hope. But at the same time, I know that there's a long way that we have to go, you know, and it's people of all races coming together right now. And I think that's beautiful. But we have to think of a way where we could really solve these issues instead of, you know, having the same conversation that's been repeated for the past century.
Breaking the cycle of lives that are taken senselessly. I definitely have to figure out how to do that. And I'm certain, as President Obama said there, I think he said it was 19,000 municipalities across the United States. And those policies have to be passed, or those changes have to be passed in each one of those cities. Mark, kind of want to change the question. I want to give you a question that's a bit different. Based on both your life experience and what you see, how is policing connected to our prison system? How are they linked and implicated or impacted by both? How policing is done in our communities or in communities with people of color?
Definitely, they're inextricably linked. So I remember before I went to prison, in a time span of 1 year, I was stopped 100 times by the San Diego Police Department. And they filled out field reports every time they stopped me. Eventually, I got arrested and sent to prison with a life sentence. But for a lot of us, our first point of contact is that officer on the street. And then we're sent to the county jail. Then we're sent to a courtroom and we're subjected to hyperpunitive sentencing statutes. And at that point, we're sent to prison. And a lot of times individuals who are sent to prison, especially in the state of California, never see the light of day again. You know, there's men in the California system who were sentenced to 7 years to life and have been in prison over 40 years. That's the reality of our system. So there's definitely an inextricable link, and we need to address the inequalities that exist throughout our system, in the prison system and the police on the streets, definitely.
Dominique, what are some of your personal experiences in understanding how our system literally devalues lives?
I mean, just like I said earlier, especially when it comes to mental health, when it comes to our children, when it comes to how members of our family are not only taken away, then our kids are put through an unfair system when it comes to adoption agencies and foster care. I've just seen our Black communities, Black and brown communities torn apart, all stemming from a cop, you know, all stemming from a police officer. That one report, that one cop who just felt lazy that day about doing his job, you know, that one cop who just had it out for someone, for whatever reason it might be. It's just unjust. It can be disheartening to see when it comes to helping some of these women on my caseload, getting their kids back, helping them organize visits. It's like it's bad enough that they're already dealing with COVID-19 and everything else. Visits are being interrupted, everything else. It's so much. It's so much.
I'd like to highlight exactly what you said. Last week we had some amazing, a week before last, we had two amazing, powerful women on our panel. One of them was Pamela Wynn, who miscarried while she was in federal custody. Literally, I described it then and I'll describe it the same way now, that our prison system is barbaric, especially when it comes to how it treats women, and it needs to change. Now,
And
I
I think
go ahead, Dominique.
I think that's where some of the frustration, even with this movement, for me comes from, is that we're not saying her name, we're not saying Sandra Bland's name, we're not saying Breonna Taylor's name. We're screaming these names, and once again, Black women are being pushed to the back of a conversation. Women are being pushed to the back of a conversation. Black men are not the only ones being murdered in these streets. We have women in our county jails being killed on a daily. We have women in our prisons being raped and killed in our prisons, and no one is doing anything about it. You know, and I hope that this conversation I hope this movement wakes that conversation up.
So I agree with you 100%. When we say Black Lives Matter, it's not Black male lives. I don't want anybody to misinterpret that it means Black lives. That means Black men, Black women, our LGBTQ community. That means people that walk around with a skin color like this. We matter. We're as valuable, no more than, no less than, but as valuable as every other human being that walks the face of this earth. And the way I've seen women treated in our carceral system is horrendous. But want to just make sure that voice is lifted up and continues to be lifted up. And we don't forget that when we say Black Lives Matter, that means all of us. I'd like to kind of shift a little bit in the sense of where we've been. So we know where we're at now. A year or so ago, I had the opportunity to visit Norway, which has an entirely different prison system. Literally in California and across our nation, we call people that are in custody inmates. It's dehumanizing. Many people talk about helping ex-offenders. It's dehumanizing. In Norway, they call people that are in prison people that are in custody, citizens that are in custody, people that are in custody. So literally, they don't lose their voting rights, and they're treated, you can go to school, all of the things that, for lack of a better expression, a prison system should look like is there in Norway. How do we switch our system over to one that protects people? And in your experience of your work, have you given much thought to that? And let's start with Mark.
Say yes, definitely. There definitely needs to be some changes in our system. A lot of times that comes through legislation, like ARC's policy team has passed 17 laws that impacted 41,000 people in the state of California. We need more of that. We have to force the police to do their job in a correct manner. And what I mean by that is in communities of color, it would be nice if the individuals who were policing that community were from that community, because they're going to respond differently than an officer who's not from that community, because they are from there and they understand the demographics in that community. But we have to change several things in our criminal justice system. And I think we have to legislate them, and then we have to follow through on the legislation. With that being said, just add one other thing. These protests are very important. Also, it's going to take a multifaceted approach to apply the pressure to this system to make this system change, because it's not working the way it is today.
Thank you. Antwon, how do we change? So our prison system as it is, and we spoke earlier, and you read a lot about what Norway's prison system looks like. How do we shift our prison that way? What needs to change in your view of the prison system, and not just the prison system, but the policing system in our communities?
That's a great question. And I'll say this: policy. Policy is so important to the way that officers conduct themselves, whether they be correction officers or whether they be officers that are on the beat patrolling our neighborhoods, terrorizing our communities. Policy is what influence their ethical practices and the way that they interact with us, whether we're incarcerated or we out here on the streets. And those policies are actually rooted in the race hate culture for Black people. And what do I mean by that? Okay, the police department. When you think about police, you got to go back to the history of how the police came to be. They used to be bounty hunters, where runaway slaves in the 1800s would run away and slave masters would put bounties on their head and the bounty hunters would go catch them and bring them back for a fee. And that cultivating that kind of culture into what is now the police department and the policies that they practice is rooted in that race-hate culture. So we have to deal with policy and the legislation that protects these policies. Because when we deal with the legislation that protects these policies, then that will force their etiquette and their ethical practices when they engage with us, whether they be correction officers when we're in prison, or whether they be officers on the street, walking the beat.
Thank you, Antwone. Truly appreciate that answer. So if we think in terms of our current prison system and policing is not protecting and serving as it should be, how do we change that? How do we get police officers across the nation, not just in Los Angeles, but in California, but across the nation? How do we get police officers or more police officers to see us, or how do we get them to see us as human, humanize us, not a threat? Myles, you want to answer that, please?
Yeah, definitely. Firstly, I know when I'm driving down the street and an officer pulls behind me, my immediate response is anxiety. They see the color of my skin and I automatically assume that they think I'm doing something wrong, even when I'm not. So for me, it would be completely, reimagining policing, what it looks like. I know that in over-policed communities, there happens to be a higher crime rate. How is that? Why does that exist? It's not proportionate. So I think, like Mark said, we need to have officers who are from that area, are very familiar with it, to go in there. Because if you have this person who just looks at you as, someone who's not human already, they're just looking at you as a potential number in the prison system, anytime they come in contact with you. And that should never be the case. What happened with George Floyd should never be the case. These police officers need to be held accountable. Law enforcement as a whole needs to be held accountable for their actions. And right now, what happened, that was just one thing that was filmed. But this happens every day somewhere. And this happens inside of our prison systems every day. But there are no video cameras in our prison system, right? So it sucks that this event had to take place, but it woke people up to the realities of what happens inside of prison and outside of prisons. In prison in general, they don't promote rehabilitation, right? That's clear. And I'm sure everyone who's on this panel could attest to that. And an environment like prison, they deliberately make it nearly impossible to attain any type of rehabilitation. And on the streets, it's the same, because we see no peace on the streets.
Thank you, Myles. Dominique, I'm going to go to a question in our chat box, but this is also for the other panelists. And I'm going to also add my opinion. So the question is, why did George Floyd's murder make this like where we're at now? Why is it like specifically when you say someone in the chat box, Sarah, was like, most specifically because of your statement that Black women are being pushed to the back. Why do you think it was George Floyd's murder that really ignited the current movement, civil unrest? Because if you think about it, like, this is not just America, this is worldwide now. And everybody's saying Black Lives Matter. By the way, for people that aren't Black, I love you, that are supporting us, thank you. Thank you for recognizing that we all matter. Black Lives Matter. Like it means so much to see so many young people out there galvanized. But to the question, why not Breonna Taylor's murder? Why not Ahmaud Arbery's murder? Why not Trayvon Martin? Like, what was it that was unique about George Floyd that made this? Why is it that his murder ignited all of this?
I'd honestly like to think that it was just the final straw. But then, as a Black woman, we're used to it. We're used to being pushed to the back of conversations. We're used to being left out of conversations, But what people don't seem to realize is that we're moms of Black boys. We're moms of Black children, And so, as long as we're winning, as long as we're winning, it doesn't really we push I'd like to think we push our ego and our pride to the back so that the message is put out across. But even still, our message deserves to be heard too. I don't know why it was George and not Breonna. I don't know why it was George and not Aubrey. I don't know why it was George and not Trayvon. But I think in general, I think it was just the straw that broke the camel's back.
Thank you, Dominique. And I'm going to go to the other panels, but I just want to share. When I first saw the video of George, I saw him not just being murdered, but being tortured for almost 10 minutes. For me, one of the things when he said, his mom had died on the day that he died, from what I understand, he called out to his mom. And when you just said Black, like, my mom is still alive. And I know, your mother of a Black boy. And so definitely for me, that was one of the things that definitely like really sunk in deep, because he called out to his mother. So for me, I think that was part of it. The other part was the amount of time, like literally they could have stopped for 10 minutes. You literally crushed that man. So that's just my view. What do you think, Mark? And then Antwone will come to you.
Definitely. I would say first, any one of those previous ones should have been enough to change this criminal justice system. But the manner that he was murdered in was so callous, in broad daylight, with people standing there saying, you're murdering this man, and they continue to do it while other officers watched. I think we felt the proverbial weight. If you're a minority in this country, you felt the proverbial knee of this country on your neck your entire life. And to me, that's what that represented. And people are now saying, enough is enough. We see the way you murdered this man. Enough is enough. We're not tolerating this anymore. Something has to change. And I really hope that this is the one event that finally changes this system so this doesn't happen again. Because in a just system, one of those officers who were standing there would have arrested the police who was murdering that man. That's what would have happened in a just system. And until we have that, we're going to continue to see minorities murdered on the streets of America.
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate you. Antwone.
Right. Well, all those murders are a tragedy. I mean, the list goes on and on to the countless murders of our Black people, whether they're male, female, regardless of gender, our gender identification. They're killing us in alarming numbers. And I just want to say that. And to answer your question, to me, in my opinion, how casual, calm, and collective, with his hands in his pocket and his knee on his neck, the way he murdered that Black man, sent a message to not just everyone here in America, but the world, that this is what we do. This is common practice. And this response is like, how dare you? This systemic racism that's been invoked of us through the police department, our contact with police, is just now being visualized to America and the world because of social media. But this is something that we've been experiencing for decades and centuries, since 1865, if you really want to take it there. We've never really been free. And this only echoes the sentiments of the way they feel about us. That's why I say policy, and legislation will force them, regardless of how you feel. I don't care if you don't like me. I don't care about that. I care about if you do your job and if I'm service equally, just like any other citizen. So policy and legislation. But yes, to answer your question real quickly, my belief is that how casual he killed that Black man publicly with his hands in his pocket sent the message, and we are responding back like, how dare you? We will not allow this to happen again. And we can't allow this to happen again.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that depth and insight, brother. Myles, I want to touch on this, and then we're going to move to the question that we've all talked about, which is supervision and being able to protest. But first, I said this earlier, if George Floyd had not been brutally murdered, let's say he survived this, he would have been taken to jail, handcuffed and taken to jail. Is incarceration compatible with the restoration of humanity? Is our incarceration, as far as incarceration period, is it compatible, especially ours?
Right now, he would be sitting inside of a jail cell, awaiting a very lengthy sentence. And the truth of the matter is that if he were a different color, that wouldn't be the case, So we have to look at things for what they are and see that this is systemic oppression. This is racial inequality at its finest. And we all got to view it in that video. You know what I mean? And either way, it's a lose-lose situation for that man, and it's a lose-lose situation for every African-American who comes into contact with law enforcement. That's been the case historically speaking, and it continues to be the case, unfortunately. And we will continue to have this conversation until we can see a different way. And I don't think going to prison would have been the solution either. There has to be something else in place, a different system, because what's happening right now hasn't worked in the past, and it continues to not work.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate that answer. So one of the things that we've been discussing as an organization and throughout our membership is many of our members in the ARC community are currently on some form of supervision, whether that's parole or probation, but they cannot afford to come in contact with police. Or they may be formerly incarcerated like all of us are. And while off supervision, we face a particular danger. We may not have the luxury to be in the streets, especially people that are on supervision. I'm a former life prisoner, as is Mark. And I know the 5 years that I was on parole, I wouldn't even like jaywalk. I've seen people go back in and have their life sentences reinstated. And so it's not something that I hear about, but being able to actually go out and protest and march peacefully, like that still puts many of our members at risk, especially if they're under supervision. I'd like to speak directly first to Mark and Myles because of your unique circumstances. And then definitely, Dominique, want to elevate the sisters, because what do we do when we want our voices to be heard? But if we walk out there just peacefully protesting, walking down the street and the police decide, we've seen this in these marches, bum rush the crowd, and you're one of the people that actually gets grabbed and cuffed. So Mark, how do we navigate that? What do we do about that? Like, can you speak about what it feels like not to be able to actually march in that fashion?
Absolutely. It's heartbreaking. Instinctively, I want to participate in these protests because I think protests are the heart of any democracy. So I want to be out there in the streets protesting. The reality is, if I come in contact with a police officer, even if I have not committed a crime, according to the conditions of my parole, I can be sent back to prison, and I can be sent back to prison for the rest of my life. So if I join a protest and an officer put handcuffs on me, that means I'm going back to prison, and then my life sentence is reimposed. But I do believe in protesting, and the way I protest now is by supporting ARC's policy team, who is passing policies that get people out of prison and back to their families. So there's other ways to protest. I have to go about it those other ways, and but it's still heartbreaking that I cannot be out there in the streets.
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate you. Thank you, brother. Myles.
Yeah, very similar to what Mark said. That was well said. And, yesterday we had a protest in my city, and I got so many calls, so many text messages asking me if I was going to be attending. And I had to tell them I couldn't. I don't have the liberty of putting myself in that situation that could so easily become volatile, right? We've seen it happen on the media. We've seen it happen in videos countless times over the past week, and I don't have that liberty. And it's very disheartening because I want to participate, but I have to be more cautious, right? More careful about the way that I go about my protesting, because I know where it could put me. If my friends, if they want to protest, they can go and do it free of anything happening. But with me, I end up inside of a prison cell simply for wanting to be there for my community. And it sucks because I can't right now, it hurts. So I have to think of I have to be more strategic, with the ways that I protest. And I think Mark made a great point by policy. Those are the things that are happening behind the scenes that people don't often see. But it's things like that help change. It's things like that help bring hope to humanity, because right now we're not seeing a lot of it. So we have to protest, but we have to do it in a way that's safe. We have to do it in a way that's careful, and we ultimately have to do it in a way that won't put us back in a system that doesn't care about us.
Thank you, Myles. So Dominique, though you're not on supervision, and earlier you said you were energized, but being like, do you have worries? Or are you afraid?
I didn't have any worries, or I wasn't afraid while I was out there because I believed in my cause. I believe in my cause. We were toe to toe with sheriffs. We were toe to toe with LAPD. What we were trying to do was peacefully protest. Nobody threw nothing at the police. Nobody. We had our things that we yelled. We were. You had your people in the crowd kill cops. You had people in the crowds defund the police. You had people in the crowds prosecute killer cops. We were yelling these things, but it wasn't like fuck you. Well, yeah, it was. Sorry, excuse me. But that's what protest is. It gets you upset, it gets you angry, but they're words, and we're exercising our First Amendment right. I wasn't fearful for arrest because while I was there, they weren't making arrests. They were attacking us, they assaulted us, but they weren't making arrests. Most arrests I seen came for curfew, like after curfew, where they felt like they were justified in doing things like that. Most arrests I've seen were after people, they accused people of inciting riots when they were actually the cause of the riots, shooting at people, starting stuff instead of dealing with the problems that they should have been dealing with. I think as long as someone isn't trying to loot as long as someone isn't trying to go beat up some cops, as long as someone's not trying to do some things like that, I feel like there are ways for people who are on supervision to still protest. Even outside of that, I mean, holding a candlelight vigil for all the people we lost to police violence and brutality, you know, all the people that we lost in the county jails to police brutality and violence, you know. There are ways we can get involved. Like you guys said, ARC is a great way to get involved with the policy that's provided there. There are other organizations doing direct policy protocol when it comes to police, with police. So getting involved with that, you know, surrounding yourself with people who are like-minded like you know, and I think it comes down to a moral thing. Like we're like, yeah, we all have things that we worry about, but at the end of the day, you know your heart. And if you're going out there to do the right thing, you should be straight. If you're going out there to do some bullshit, that's a whole nother issue, you know?
All right, thank you, Dominique. Love the fire. In a minute, I want to come back to you for some, Mark, some kind of different about supervision. But first, I'd like to hear from Antwon. You discharged parole. You're no longer on parole, but you see in many instances where you've had police just bum rush the crowd and they're cuffing people. Are you thoughtful, or what are you thinking in terms of if you're out protesting and then you're in that situation, even though you're off parole?
Right, that's a great question. What I think in that situation is to always be law abiding and exercise your rights. So if we have a right to protest, we should be able to exercise that. I don't think that law enforcement or any other agency should be out there trying to deny us a right to protest. When they're throwing their bombs and they're shooting these rubber bullets and all that and dispersing the crowd when no violence has taken place, to me, that's a denial of my constitutional right to protest. So I think it goes on them some accountability to uphold the Constitution more effectively and efficiently when serving the public, and not necessarily me saying that I'm doing something wrong when I'm peacefully protesting. So I will stand and peacefully protest. And if I got to go to jail because I'm peacefully protesting, I'm very hopeful that the Constitution will weigh in, will stand firm, and I will be released without any charges, especially if I'm not causing any mayhem, destruction, violation of anyone's property, and I'm not disturbing the peace. If I'm peacefully protesting, I shouldn't have any charges against me. That should not account against me being violated or anything like that. I'm not trying to come in contact with the police. So I think these issues need to be dealt with those authority figures to understand these things, so we won't have these things over our head. All these things need to be addressed on a local, state, and federal government level, where these policies and practices have to change. Everything needs to be addressed. Transparency. Someone mentioned in the comments about transparency in the law. Yeah, we need more transparency so we can understand what they're doing, see how they're doing it, so we can stay on top of it. And I think if we did that more, we would have less worry being out there peacefully protesting.
Thank you so much. In our chat box, so I have to say this because if I don't, I'm not going to stand true. We don't use terms such as felons, ex-cons. Those are not terms that we use. If I say people that have been convicted of crimes or people that are on parole, I'm saying people. So if you, when sending me questions, I will answer them. And yes, it's different from state to state in terms of who can vote, but we literally do not use that language. Language also propels the type of system that we live in. If we call people that are in prison inmates, we do not look at them. If we call people that are in prison, people that are in custody, we are humanizing the human beings that are currently in custody. So that's something I hope for everyone that's listening to this. Language matters. Language can either inspire and motivate, or it can crush and destroy. That language is literally how we communicate. Mark, in terms of like your travel, so I know you're in a unique circumstance because literally you're up near the Oregon border providing rehabilitative programs for Pelican Bay Prison. And when it was time for you, when you went to go visit family, you weren't able to do that. And there are other restrictions because you're on parole. Like, is there a link, or do you see a historical link between both our carceral system, the history of just oppression and slavery, and how do you view that?
Absolutely. So these are my current conditions of parole today, right? One of these conditions is you shall not travel more than 50 miles from your residence without prior approval from your parole agent. And I need that prior approval on my person if I step 1 inch beyond 50 miles of my current residence, right? Or I go back to prison and then the life sentence gets reimposed. So to put that in context, you know, back in the 1800s, a slave on a plantation needed approval from his master to travel off the plantation, and he had to carry that approval on him. So when you put it in context, it's the same thing. I cannot travel beyond 50 miles. And it's heartbreaking because I don't have a single family member who lives within 50 miles of my current location. And the criminal justice system is the one who's telling me that I cannot go spend time with my family. So I think it's heartbreaking. And I think that's something that has to be addressed, because I sat before a board who said I no longer pose a risk to society. And then they placed a whole bunch of conditions on my release, that being one of them.
So thank you, Mark, for that answer. I was going to wait until I actually got to a better segue, but one of our brothers that's on the Hope and Redemption team is really insistent. I'm not going to put you on blast, but first, to answer your question, which I will reveal to our audience, yes, it's definitely needed. But the question that was posed is there a place for forgiveness in all of this? And so from my perspective, and I'd like to give each one of you an opportunity to answer that, absolutely. The work that we do here at the Anti-Recidivism Coalition, we believe in second chances and redemption for every person that's willing to be accountable for their actions and demonstrate that they are remorseful for those actions. And forgiveness is intertwined in that. So absolutely, but I don't know about you, but I watched that 10 minutes, and after they, like, just the way they handled George Floyd's body, the attitude afterwards, I did not see any type of accountability or looking to demonstrate that there was remorse. But there should always be room for forgiveness, because I don't want I can only speak for myself, but I don't want my heart to be filled with hate and anger. Dominique, what do you think? Is there room for forgiveness in this realm?
I mean, forgiveness of what exactly? For the George Floyd or the racism or the Breonna Taylors, or, you know, like, for what? The unfair system? Like, there's so much healing that has to be done before we can even talk about forgiveness. I know that comes hand in hand. Healing and forgiveness come hand in hand, but there's, like, we gotta start somewhere first. Like, we barely started this conversation, and y'all want to talk about forgiveness already? Like, this is not an overnight, oh, all's forgotten. Antwon and Mark said, like, this, the police department stems from slavery, you know, slave catchers and things like that. So it's like, until we defund them, until we, like, break that whole thing down and come up with something new for our communities to where we can feel safe and where we can feel valued, there is no forgiveness, you know. If you're referring to racism, I mean, I'm so happy to see the number of minorities and others and whites come out and show us support and all this other stuff. But if they're not taking it back to their workplace, if they're not taking it back to their schools, if they're not teaching their kids that, then it means nothing. That's forgiveness to me. You know, like, until those conversations, until we start seeing some type of progress from those type of conversations, then it's probable, but not right now.
Thank you, Dominique. Tell me, what do you think, Myles? Is there room for forgiveness?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there has to be room for forgiveness, or else we won't heal, or else we won't make any type of change. We won't see any prison reform. We won't see any systemic reform. So I think the first thing that we have to do is learn to forgive. Like, if we don't allow this to be a one-time event that we speak about for a week and then forget, and we can continue on with this conversation, I think forgiveness is kind of the key aspect of this whole thing right now. We have to, you know, address the pain that we have, address the grieving that we're all doing as a nation right now, and then learn to heal by forgiving each other and forgiving ourselves, because we all play a role in this. I mean, any one of us could have been George Floyd, and we have to see that we have to see each other as ourselves. We have to see each other as one. Like, we all exist in this together. And we need to be able to forgive that man, no matter how hard it's going to be. We have to learn to forgive one another.
Thank you, Myles. And finally, just to put a pin in that, in order for us to heal, there has to eventually be forgiveness. if not now, it has to be somewhere there. After accountability, there has to be forgiveness in order for us to heal, because we don't want to walk around with this anger in our chest forever. And I'm gonna move on. Is there a different way? We're seeing pictures of protesting. We'd really like to know, Antwon, are there different or alternate ways to be able to protest?
Absolutely. I mean, you can protest, by not supporting certain companies or corporations or institutions that back, certain agencies or whatever. You can protest in many different ways. You know what I mean? You don't have to necessarily go out in the street. You can stop eating or whatever it is. However you want to protest, you can protest. Yeah, of course, there's many different ways to protest. But I also want to respond to what you was just said in regards to forgiveness. And I respect everybody's opinion wholeheartedly. How I feel is hell no. There is no forgiveness right now. There is not even room for forgiveness right now until we deal with the injustice. Now, is there potentially forgiveness somewhere down the line? Yes, but the conversation right now shouldn't be about no damn forgiveness. And I'm gonna tell you why. We got the 13th Amendment of the Constitution, which abolished slavery, was approved by Congress in January 31st, 1865. Here's the thing, and I'm gonna use the whole 60 seconds on this one. Under the 13th Amendment of the Constitution, slavery and involuntary servitude could only be imposed on a person as punishment for a crime after such person has been convicted for a crime committed. Section 2 of the 13th Amendment says that Congress has the power to enforce this law under appropriate legislation. 5 years later, after 1865, so we're talking about 1870 from 1865, 5 years after the adoption of this amendment in 1865, the percentage of Blacks in prison went from almost zero to about 33% in 5 years. Most Black prisoners were hired out to whites for the purpose of working the cotton fields, constructing railroads, and building projects in the interests of the bankers and the northern industrialists during the Industrial Revolution, and southern plantation owners as well. This new system of slave labor allowed the controlling forces. Now, I'm gonna stop right there. I was just reading the excerpt.
We literally, we have time.
I'm gonna stop right there, but yeah.
We have time constraints, and many of our members want to answer to what are the alternate ways, because I've had many members ask this question. What are alternate ways that I can protest without endangering myself of being put back in jail? I've had a few members that say I would rather be dead than be back in jail, but I want to be out there protesting. So can we give alternate ways for people to be able to protest?
Yes, you can do your sign, and you can post your sign on your social media. A lot of folks are communicating these days, especially with these restrictions, the 6 feet and these restrictions and all that stuff with the pandemic that's going on. We got to stay at home right now. I understand that. Most folks, you can write your sign and post your sign in different groups or chats or whatever. You can make T-shirts. You could bedazzle a shirt with your kids and whatever, and put little signs and walk around with it, and you can protest, like I said, without putting yourself in danger. For those individuals who are still on paperwork, whether it's parole or probation, I encourage you to use the social media as the way to protest and speak your truth without putting yourself in harm's way, because I wouldn't want you to be out there and then end up violating your parole or your probation and again sitting back to the slammer. That's not the thing. So we can organize something where we can try to protect them and do something where we can have our little secluded space and maybe go out there with our sign, whatever it may be. Maybe we can come up with something like that collectively. But right now, as an individual, and if you're on parole or probation, I encourage you to use your social media platforms to make your signs and protest, because you do have that right to protest. That's my response to that, brother.
Okay, so because of time, I can't go to the others, as we have to go to our closing, because I want to give each one of you an opportunity to give closing thoughts. 1 minute each, please. Dominique, love to fire. Give us your closing thoughts right now. Maybe we'll do a segment 2 of this, because I have other questions that are coming in that I want to get to. But we we really won't have time, but I would like to know your closing thoughts for right now, as there are still protests that are going on in Los Angeles, in Orange County, across the state, nation, and around the world. What are your closing thoughts?
I'm gonna just say that all black men and women on here, I want you to know that I'm fighting for you. I'm here for you. For those of y'all probation or parole, I'm out here on the front lines for y'all. You know, this isn't over. We're gonna come up with something so y'all can get more involved, so y'all can feel like y'all right here with us, but just know in spirit y'all there with us. I just want to thank ARC for giving us this platform to talk about this and just give like our raw feelings. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dominique. Appreciate you. Mark.
Closing thoughts. Basically, vote. If you have the right to vote, vote. If you don't have the right to vote, fight to get your right to vote back. I don't have the right to vote right now. I'm supporting legislation that's going to give me that right back, because right now I'm silenced because I don't have that right. And I would say to all our ARC members and everyone who's watching this, look, your life matters. Your life is precious. I don't care what the system is telling you. Your life has value. And we're going to make this system realize that your life has value. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate you. Myles.
Everyone, we matter, you know, our lives matter, and we should not continue to devalue Black lives. What happened to George Floyd and what's happened in the past should not continue to happen. Sam, I just want to say something to you. You know, a great leader isn't judged by how many followers he has. It's how many leaders he can make. And right now, what we're doing is we're making a lot of leaders. So I just want to thank you for that. And go vote, you know, do policy work. That's what matters. That's where the change takes place. Thank you all.
Thank you. Appreciate you, brother. Greatly appreciate you. Antwon, last thoughts?
My last thoughts, just supporting of the other panelists, because I believe in what they said. Like the one brother said, go vote. Absolutely go vote. Get active in your community. Do your part. You know, check on your elders in your community, your neighbor. You see what I'm saying? It starts right there. It starts right there in your street, in your home, in your community, with your family. You know, go bring it to these legislators. We need to bring it to the governor. We need to bring it to the senator. We need to bring it to Congress. What I say is, don't be passive. Don't get let's not let back. Let's step up. Let's step up to the plate. Let's ramp this movement on and keep mashing on. Let's keep mashing on. This is a fight, and we're going to fight this thing all the way to Congress, all the way to the White House if we have to. Let's go. It's time to fight. It's boots on the ground. Let's let intellect be above emotion. Intellect be above emotion and drive this thing right on home for equality for Black people and all people in America. But right now, Black lives are under attack, so Black lives matter. That's what I got to say.
Thank you so much, Antwon. Greatly appreciate you. Greatly appreciate each and every one of you lifting your voice. My last thoughts for the day are this. So for me as a leader, a few things I have to look at. I have to look at how to strategically approach this as an issue and look at the history of where we're at and where we want to get to. And one of the things we have to look at, if we go back into the civil rights movement, we made great gains on the federal level with many different rights. And what it never trickled down to, and what President Obama was trying to do was one point, was bring it down to the local level where police, because if you think about it, how many state police have you heard killed a Black man, a Black boy, a Black woman? Like, you usually hear about this happening in local municipalities and cities. And so that's where the policy change has to come in at, the transparency. This is what my last thoughts of the day are, is that we need to have a concerted effort to change these policies in every city all across this nation to make sure that there's transparency, because to be honest, the police officer that killed George Floyd should not have been on the streets with 18 complaints and having been disciplined twice. So had there been transparency and we knew that and there was accountability, he would not have been on the police force and George Floyd would still be alive today, at least in my opinion. For next steps for our audience, few things. First, we'd like to call to action. If you see on your screen right now, join our virtual town hall for Civilian Oversight Commission for the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. We will be pushing that out on June 11th, before June 11th. Join this. There's a lot when it comes to oversight. The Oversight Commission, it's important because this is where the community, the citizens get to look and see and have oversight on what sheriffs do. Also read about what happened with the first subpoena that was issued to this sheriff. And remember, the sheriff is a voted official. He's an elected official. He can be recalled. It costs $50,000, I believe, to actually set up a recall. Like, he can be recalled if he's not doing right by our communities. Understand how that works. The other thing is, ARC is working on policy right now in conjunction with other community-based organizations across the state to pass ACA 6 voting rights for people that are currently on parole. And what this is an initiative to actually get this put on the ballot for the people of the state of California to be able to vote and determine, should people who are on parole have the right to vote? It is my belief that we come home. There are many of our ARC members that are under supervision that are essential workers. They have to go to work. They're the people that made our country continue to move forward, even while the pandemic was hitting us initially. They are essential workers, and yet they cannot vote. They pay taxes, and yet they cannot vote. I was once one of these individuals. Currently, Mark is one of those individuals. Myles, these are people we need to be able to have our voting rights. We're part of our communities, and we need to be able to plug in and be civically engaged. Bail funds for so many people that have been being arrested during the pandemic. Please give to bail funds. If you look on the screen, you'll see a number of different bail funds that you can donate to, $5, $10, $15, $25. Donate to the bail funds to be able to bail people out that are currently locked up for practicing their civil rights. And in some instances, they may not have been, but they do not deserve to be sitting in jails for months and months and months waiting to actually come back home. The last thing that I would like to say for everyone that's listening, please understand that this is a human issue. As a Black man that has been incarcerated, I literally tense up when the police get behind me, even though I know I've done nothing wrong. And when they stay behind me for a prolonged amount of time, the first thought that goes through my mind is this gonna be my day. No Black man, Black woman, or boy, or anyone should feel that way. When law enforcement gets behind us, we should just be thinking to ourselves, "Are my tags expired?
Is my light out?"
It's just like literally not is this gonna be my day? That should not be the thought. When you're pulled over, you should not feel like I can't take my hands off the steering wheel, else he's gonna. Like, those are the thoughts. Like, Black people feel that when we're pulled over. So understanding, like, those are the things that we've been going through for such a long time. And again, all of the people that are out there protesting for rights for all of us, thank you. Thank you for the love that you've shown the African-American community. Thank you for coming together. And let's continue to make this so that we can make this country a better, safer place for all people. Black Lives Matter. Peace, blessings, and thank you for joining us.